everyone, welcome to Bab Fashion's YouTube channel. My name is Eunice. In this video, we'll be learning how to make this beautiful high-low gathered flared gown. I'm actually making this for a 5-year-old, but please bear in mind that the method we'll be using to draft this gown is also applicable to adults. So this method works perfectly for every size. So please, if this is your first time on my channel, kindly click on the subscribe button to subscribe and make sure to put on your notification bell so you get notified every time I upload a new video. Please also feel free to share this video with your friends, share this video on your social media pages. Thank you, and let's get started. So these are the materials we're going to be using for this project. First is our tulle net, and the tulle net here I have 10 yards of tulle net. And then this is our sample lace. We'll be using this sample lace for the upper bodies. And then I also have hard net that we'll be using to achieve that fullness or the standing effect for our flare. And then I have my satin that will be serving as the lining. So these are the measurements we're going to be working with. First is the shoulder measurement, the chest measurement, the waist measurement, the hip measurement, which is optional, and then the half length, that's from shoulder to half length. And then you need the full front length, that's from shoulder to where you want the length to stop in front, and then from shoulder to where you want the length to stop at the back, because the back is lower than the front. So here the front length is 27 inches while the back length is 34 inches. So now we want to determine the length of our flare. So to determine the length of the flare, I'm calculating the front first. So the front length is 27 inches. I'm going to subtract the half length from it, and that gave me 16 inches. And for the back length is 34 inches. So minus the half length, I'm left with 23 inches. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is to calculate the difference between the front and back length. Already I said the back length is 34 inches while the front length is 27. So I'm going to subtract 27 from 34 and I am left with 7 inches. So the difference between the front and back length is 27 inches. So the next thing we're going to do now is to calculate the radius of the flare we are making. So for the radius, I'm going to divide the waist circumference by 6.28, which is the normal formula, our regular formula we use for determining a 360 flare. So here I said the waist measurement is 24 inches. So 24 divided by 6.28, that gave me 3.8. And I can approximate this 3.8 to 4 inches. So now the radius we are working with is 4 inches. So after having determined the radius, the next thing I'm going to do is to divide the difference between the front and back length into two so that we can distribute it evenly. And the difference between the front and back length is 7. When you divide it into two, that will leave you with 3.5. So I'm adding 4 inches, which is our radius, plus the difference between the front and back, which is 3.5. That's half of the difference. And then plus our front length and back length of the flare. So here I have 4 plus 3.5 plus 23 inches plus 16 inches. And that gave me a total of 46 inches 0.5. Okay, so and I can approximate that to 47 inches, and then I'm going to go ahead and add 1 inch for my hemming allowance. So the total length of my flare is going to be 48 inches. So these 48 inches I have here, I'm going to divide it by 2. That would determine the amount of fabric to fold. So if I divide 48 inches by 2, that will give me 24 inches. So right now I'm going ahead to fold my flare. You want to make sure that you have 24 inches. Okay, so you can see I have 24 inches. So I'm going to fold 24 inches again this way. Okay, so I'm folding into 4. So how did I come about my 24 inches? I added the radius, which is 4, plus the difference between the front and back. The difference between the front and back, I divided it into 2, and that gave me 3.5. So that's 4 plus 3.5, and then plus the front length, and then plus the back length. So that gave me a total of 46.5, and I approximated 46.5 to 47, and that's how I got my 47. So plus 1 inch for hemming allowance, and that gave me 48. So that 48 I divided it into 2 to fold my fabric. Remember that that's the front and back length all together, so you must divide it into 2 to determine the amount of fabric to fold. So having done that, the next thing I'm going ahead to do now is to mark the radius of our 360 flare. So you can see I marked my 4 inches round. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark the entire length. So still placing my tape from the apex there, I'm marking 24 inches round. So having marked 24 inches round, this is what I have. So after marking out 24 inches round, I'll go ahead and cut out the flare. Now we have our flare. So to determine the high-low effect, first I'm going to mark the center where I have the folded part. So you can see this folded part here. I'm just going to use my chalk to mark this point down. And then I'll also bring in my pressing iron and iron this part very well so that we have our crease line showing clearly, okay? And then next, I'm going to open up the flare like this. Can you see what I've done? I've opened up the flare like this. So from this point where I have the center that I marked, I'm going to mark that radius of 4 inches. So now this point I'm marking now is now our new center. Okay, so this side that I'm marking now is going to be the front, while the other side will be the back. So from this new point I marked 4 inches, I'm going to reconfirm that I'm going to remark our radius of 4 inches, placing my tape from this point now. Can you see what I'm doing? So I'm marking 4 inches round. I'm marking 4 inches round. Just watch carefully, you will understand what I am doing. So can you see? So now the radius now is on one side, is more on one side of the flare. Can you see what we have? So I'm going to go ahead now and confirm the length. That's now, this is now our back length. You can see I have my 24 inches here at the back, which is the back length. You remember I said our left back length is 23 inches plus 1 inch. That will give us 24 inches. And here in front, you can see I have my 16 inches, which is going to be the front length of the flare. So I'll go ahead and cut out the radius. Can you see that? So it is really simple. Just take your time and watch carefully. You will understand everything I have done. So can you see that now we have our front length shorter than the back. So now this center back, I'm going to slash it open because we're going to have our zipper at this point. The longer part is the center back, so I went ahead to slash it open. So I'm just going to open up this flare so that we can see what I am talking about. So this is what a high-low flare looks like. You can see that the back is longer than the front. So it's now time for us to treat the tulle net as well. So first I went ahead to fold my 10 yards of tulle net into 4 equal parts. After folding into 4 equal parts, I went ahead to fold that 4 equal parts into 2. So if I have 4 layers and I fold into 2, I'm now going to have 8. So this is me just counting it for us to see. You can see that I have 8, right? So now I folded 4 into 2 and then I now have 8. So next I now went ahead to fold it lengthwise. So automatically that means I folded it That's I folded the 8 into 2 now. So folding it into 2, that will now give me 16. So I folded lengthwise. So you can see that I have a square shape on the table. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is to enter the radius. So this radius I'll be using here, I'm going to multiply the radius I used on the satin by 2. Why am I multiplying by 2? This is because the tulle net is going to be gathered. Unlike the satin that will not have gathers, but this tulle net is going to be gathered. So that is why I'm multiplying the radius by 2. So 4 times 2, that will give me 8 inches. So from the apex of the folded fabric, I'm going ahead to mark 8 inches. So now this means that the radius for my net is 8 inches. I hope that is clear. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to mark the length of the flare. So right now that the radius has increased to 8 inches, so that means I cannot use that 24 inches I used on the satin. I'm going to also add 4 inches to that measurement. So remember that I used a length of 24 inches on the satin. So I'm going to add 4 inches to it to actually make it, that's for it to correspond with what I have in front, because I'll be cutting out this radius. I hope we understand. So now from this apex here, I'm going to go ahead and mark 29 inches, not 28. Why am I marking on 29 inches? This is because I actually need 1 inch, extra 1 inch, so that the net is longer than the satin properly, instead of marking exactly on 28 inches. So I'm just adding 1 inch. I won't be hemming the net. I won't be hemming the net. I'll be leaving it the way it is. I will only hem the satin. So just take note of what I'm doing. From the apex here, I'm marking 29 inches. And like I said, that what brought about this increase is because I increased the radius by extra 4 inches. So that 4 inches has to also be added to the length of the flare. Please, I hope we understand what I am trying to say. So I'm going ahead to connect the points like this. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to bring in my scissors and cut out the flare. And then I'll show us how to achieve the high-low effect on the net also. So here we are. This is what our flare looks like. But of course, we cannot leave this flare like this because we are making a high-low flare. So to achieve the high-low effect, this is what I'll be doing. From the folded part here, I'm going to measure the actual radius of 4 inches. So I'm marking 4 inches here at this point. So you can see I have my 4 inches. So at this point where I have the 4 inches, I'm going to refold my fabric, meaning that I'm going to use that part as the center now. Okay. So having folded at this point, can you see now that I now can have that the back now has become longer than the front? They are no longer equal. So here where I have the mark is going to be our center front, and you can see the back length is 7 inches longer than the front, which is actually the difference between our front and back. So the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to remark the radius of 8 inches. I hope we remember that this 8 inches, why I'm marking 8 inches is because I'm going to gather the net. So if you're not going to have gathers, there's no need to increase it. So now this is what our front length is. Our front length is 18 inches. So remember I made my net longer. So the net is actually longer than the satin. This is so that it covers up the satin neatly. My actual front length is supposed to be 16, so you can see is 18 inches, so that is quite longer than the satin. I hope that is clear. So I'm going ahead to cut out the radius, okay? And this is what we have. So our back is lower or is longer than the front. So I'm going to also slash open the center back like I did for the satin. And you see, I'm going to slash it open because that will be the center back where we're going to have our zip allowance. So I'm just going to carefully open it, make sure that whatever I have on the left is what I have on the right, like you can see. So I'm just going to pin it carefully. You need to pin it. Remember, I have several layers. You take note that I said it from the beginning that I folded my net into four first before I now went ahead to fold it into two and all that. So this is me notching the center front so that it doesn't shift. You want to make sure that you notch that part so everything sits really well. Okay. So now I'm opening it up. So I'm pinning all the four layers. That's the first four fold that I have. That's actually what is going to be. So this net is layered into four parts. I hope we get what I'm saying. So, and then I'll pin. So you can see I have my four layers. I'll pin and then I'll slash the center back open. So you want to be very careful when you're doing this. You don't want one net to drop and be longer than the others or not sitting well. You want to make sure that you do this, pin this carefully, because I'll be stitching all four of them together. That's, I'll be running my gather stitch on all four of them. Then we'll gather it and place it on top of our satin, because our satin is the actual measurement of the waist. That's is the actual waist measurement. We are not going to be gathering the satin. Okay. So after slashing the center back open, this is what I have. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and run a loose stitch. So that's the essence of pinning them together, the four pieces, so that no one will shift away. So I'm going to run a loose stitch on the round the waistline from one side of the back to the other side. And then I'll show us how to gather it and place it on our satin. Okay, so I've gone ahead to run my loose stitch on the net and I've gathered it to the waist circumference of our satin. So you can see I used a contrasting thread so that we can see what I have done. So all I did was to increase the stitch on my machine to loose stitch so that I can gather it. And I gathered it to the waist circumference I have on the satin. And you can see that I have pinned the satin and the net together. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and stitch them together. Okay, I'm going to run a stitch and make sure to stitch them together so that we have one piece. And then to hem the satin, I'm going to fold 1/4 inch at the hem here. So I'm just going to fold 1/4 inch, that will be 1/2 inch. It is either you weave it and then fold 1/2 inch at once, or you fold twice. I'll prefer to fold twice because I do not have a pink weaving thread. So, and I don't want this to show outside. Remember, it's high low, so it is just better to stitch it down so that you don't see a different color of weaving thread, since I don't have a pink weaving thread. And then this is our second lining that we'll be using. And it is a full flare. All I did was to make this flare, the radius of the flare, more than the radius I used on the waistline. This is because I want to gather this lining, so it will actually help to give us that fullness. So remember that the radius I used for the main flare was 4 inches, but on this lining I used 6 inches just so that I can gather it a little. And the length of this flare is 15 inches. It is actually shorter than the front length of the flare. This is so that the lining, you will not see the lining from outside, since we are making a high-low flare. I hope we understand that. So basically, I use the front length of the flare to determine the length of the lining. So here I use 15 inches since the front length of the flare is 16 inches. So here I used 15 inches so that is shorter than the main flare. Okay, so now this is my net. I'm going to cut long strips of 9 inches, and I'm going to show us how to gather it to it. So before placing my net, I'm going to come down from the waistline of the flare by 3 inches, because this net will not start exactly from the waistline of the flare. I'll come down by 3 inches from the waistline, and this point where I marked my 3 inches is where I'm going to have my nets pleated. We will understand what I mean by the time we start doing it. And then the length of the net is going to be 9 inches. I'll use it to create pleats there, and then I'll show us the next thing to do. So this is the lining, and I came down from the waistline by 3 inches and I marked it round. So you can see I've marked my 3 inches round. So the next thing I'm going to do is to measure what I have here. Take note that the lining is on fold. So you can see, so what I have here is about 31 inches. So this 31 inches, I'm going to multiply 31 inches by 2 because this lining now is on fold. So when I multiply 31 by 2, that will give me 62 inches. Then I'll go ahead and multiply the 62 by 3 because we're going to be pleating this net on this line I have marked here. When you are pleating, you need to multiply by 3, but also if you don't have enough net, if you multiply by 2, that's fine. Okay, so I went ahead to cut net using the length of the net comes in 60 inches. I use the entire length of the net, and then the length, I use the entire length of the net to determine the width, and then the length of the net I cut is 9 inches straight. So I'm just going to pleat it here. So take note of what I did. I measured the circumference, that's where I'll be pleating the net, and I got 31 inches. And because it is on fold, I multiplied it by 2, and that gave me 62. So that 62 I got, I multiplied 62 by 3. But this depends on the amount of net you have. And for me, after multiplying 62 by 3, that's what I used to cut the net. The net, so 62 in 3 places, that's what I have here. And I'm pleating it round this mark that I have here. And the length of the net is 9 inches. So you can see it's chopping above the end of the lining. And I've also hemmed the down part of the lining. I hope we understand this. Just watch carefully what I'm doing. You will surely understand what I am doing. And if you have any comments or any suggestions or any questions, please feel free to drop it in the comment section. So just in case you haven't subscribed at this point, please kindly click on the subscribe button to subscribe. Feel free to share this video, like, and leave a nice comment. Thank you, and let's continue. Okay, so I'm done pleating my net. So I'm just going to take this to my sewing machine and stitch round to hold the net and the lace together and the satin together. And then I'm also going to run a loose stitch on the waistline so that we can gather it to the waist circumference. So I'll do that and come back and show us the next thing to do. So it's time for us to draft the upper bodice. So first I'm going ahead to fold my fabric into 2, and then I'll fold into 4. We'll be drafting the front and back together. So take note that the folded part here is our center front and the open part here is the center back. That's the zip allowance. So you can see that I'm giving a space of 1.5 inches, which is our zip allowance. That's away from the center front. So I'll bring in my ruler and mark a straight line here, indicating that this is our zipper allowance. So the next thing I'm going to do is to draw the shoulder line, which is the starting line. So this is basically our basic bodies. So if you're already conversant with basic bodies, this will not be strange to you. So here on the shoulder line, I marked a neck width of 2.5 inches. Next, I'm going ahead to mark half of the shoulder measurement plus half inch for joining the sleeve. The shoulder is 11 inches. When you divide by 2, that will give you 5.5. So plus half inch for joining the sleeve, that's 6 inches. On that shoulder measurement, I came down by 3/4 of an inch for the shoulder slope. Because this is for a child, I'm using a shoulder slope of 3/4 of an inch, and I connected it to the neck width. The next thing I went ahead to do is to enter the armhole measurement, which is dividing the bust circumference, her chest circumference, by 6 plus 1.5, and that gave me the armhole measurement. So at that armhole measurement, all I did was to confirm the shoulder measurement plus half inch at that point to connect it to the shoulder line. So the next thing I'm doing now is to mark the half length. So her half length plus half inch, which is her half length is 11, so plus half inch, that's 11.5. So it's that simple. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to get the midpoint of the armhole, I'll go in by 1/2 inch, and then I will connect it back to the shoulder tip like this with a slanted line back to the shoulder tip. And then here on the armhole line, which is also the chest line, I'm going to enter quarter of her chest measurement. The chest measurement is her bust measurement, but because this is a child, she doesn't have bust. So I'm just referring to it as chest measurement. So I'm entering quarter of her chest measurement here, and then I'll curve it to meet this 1/2 inch mark I have here. So this is her armhole measurement. And this armhole is for both the front and back. Okay. So here on the chest line, I'm entering the sewing allowance of 2 inches because I already have the bust measurement here. On the waistline, I entered quarter of the waist measurement plus 2 inches for my sewing allowance. I always use 2 inches for sewing allowance, but I actually sew on 1 inch, and the remaining 1 inch is for ease. Okay, this depends on the kind of outfit I am making. So here for the back neckline, I'm using a back neck depth of 1 inch. And then already the neck width is 2.5 inches. And for the front, I'm using the same 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. So that's that. It's really simple. So here at the center back, I'm going to go in by 1/2 inch. This is to eliminate zipper bulge. You don't want this zipper to fold at the back. Despite the fact that this is a child, you still need to do this just like we also do for adults. So you can see I extended the back neckline all the way into the zip allowance. So I've cut out the back neckline. I'm taking out the zipper slope, the zipper bulge, sorry. And then I'm going to cut the armhole. So this armhole is for both the front and back. So when you go in by 1/2 inch for a child, it is just okay. So 1/2 inch both front and back. I'm taking away the shoulder slope, and then this is me cutting the side as well. And then I'll cut out the excess that we do not need here at this point. So here I'm going to separate the front from the back. Now we have our two back pieces. I'll keep it aside and then cut the front neckline. So you can see that the basic bodice is really simple. So if you don't know how to draft your basic bodice, I'm going to drop the link in the description box so that you can watch and really understand how we came about this. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to place this satin on the leftover satin so that I can cut the lining. This one I have here is going to laminate the lace. So basically I'm going to cut the lace and also cut another lining. So I need two linings for each of them, and then I'll cut the lace. This is because we are using a lace fabric. So when you are working with lace, of course you must always cut two linings. One will laminate the lace and the other will serve as the main lining, which is what I have done here already. And I've stitched the satin and the lace together. So you can see the one underneath is separate. You can see this is the satin at the back of the lace, and the one underneath is going to be the actual lining. And then here also I went ahead to cut a band. I placed my fabric on fold of 3 inches, and then I cut a band, and I'm going to have this band only in front of these bodies. The length is 3 inches and the width is what I have there on the waistline. Even though it's more than it, I can always trim out my excess. So now I'm going to place the band and top stitch it, that stitch it on top of the front piece, and then I'll place the lining on the right side of the fabric, right side of the satin, which is the lining facing right side of the lace, and I'm going to turn the neckline. I'll repeat the same thing for the back, right side facing right side of the lace, and then I'll turn the neckline, turn the zip allowance, and then I'll show us the next thing to do. So as you can see, I've sewn the sides, that I've used my lining to turn all the sides, and this is what I have. And see the front part, I have my band, everything is looking all beautiful already. And this is our back piece. Now to join the shoulders, I'm going to place a lining facing lining, and then I'll flip the lace side to face the lace. Just watch carefully what I'm doing. I'll pin this point and I'll stitch on half inch. Then I'll bring in the other side. I'll place it like this, lining facing lining. Then I'll flip the side with the lace to go face the lace in front. Can you see how I'm turning it? And then I will stitch also on half of an inch. And then here I have my cap sleeve. I cut a cap sleeve, so it's just a normal basic sleeve, but this is a cap sleeve because it's stopping at the cap's height. Okay, so I also have the belt. I cut a belt that will be sewing to the side, and this is it. So I'm going to place it on the two sides. So I'm going to sew my sleeve and sew the sleeve and stitch the belt to the side and shoulders, and which is what I have done already. Can you see what it looks like? I've stitched the belts and the sleeves as well. It's coming out really beautiful. So first I'm going to fold this upper bodice into two and get the center front. So you want to make sure to fold it into two and notch it. So once I have the middle, I'll notch it, and then I'll bring in the flare, which is the down part. I'll also fold it into two and notch it as well. So you want to make sure that so that you don't shift, it doesn't shift to one side. You want to make sure that the highest point is at the middle because it's a high low flared gown. Okay, so I'm going to place them middle against middle here, and then I'll pin it this way. You see, then I'll go ahead and pin all the way to the side. So you want to make sure that the gathers comes out really well. Can you see? So this is what I have here. So I'm pinning it. So now this is what I'm going to do. You know, I have turned my lining, this center back, that's the zip allowance part. So when placing the flare, you want to make sure that you leave half of an inch. That's, you have to make sure that half of an inch comes out at this center back where you have this zip allowance part, because you're going to be using it to turn the lining at the down part. So now watch carefully on this side so that you understand what I'm trying to say. So when pinning my flare, I'll make sure to leave half inch on this side away from the center back where I have my zip allowance. And then I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and stitch. So making sure that I have that half inch that I'll be using to turn my lining. So then next I'm going to place the lining now on the lining side. Take note that this main fabric, I placed it on the front side, which is the main fabric side. And then now I'm placing the lining on the lining side, and then I'm going to stitch also all four of them, all three of them together. But I will first do this one first, and then before I place the lining on the lining side. Can you see? So I've pinned the lining on the lining side. So you can see that the upper bodice is in between the lining and the main flare. Can you see that? So after stitching them together, so this half inch I left here at the center back, I'm going to use it to turn the lining at this side. I'll stitch with that half inch to turn the lining. Can you see? So I'm going to stitch it down. I'll repeat the same thing on the other side. I'm also going to use the half inch to stitch it down at this point. Just hold them together and stitch down so that you can turn that part neatly. You don't want to leave it rough, okay? So after stitching the sides or the center back, I'm going to go ahead and fix my zipper using the zip allowance I added, and then I'll come back and show us the final outcome of this gown. So this is what our gown looks like. Can you see how beautiful it turned out? It came out really, really beautiful. I also went ahead to cut a bow, to make a bow for this gown. Yes, I didn't add it to this video. This is because I don't want this video to be longer than necessary. You can see that this is already a 30 minutes video. So in my next video, I'm going to show us a detailed video on how I made this beautiful bow. So if you have watched this video up until this point and you have learned something, please make sure to like this video, share this video, and do not hesitate to subscribe to my channel, and also make sure you put on your notification bell so you get notified every time I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.